The battlefield was silent, except for the crackling of burning metal and the low hum of alien engines. Dark smoke rose into the air, covering the stars above. On the broken ground, among shattered weapons and fallen soldiers, one human still stood, his wrists bound with iron chains. He was tired, his clothes torn, his face marked with dust and blood, but his eyes were calm, steady. Watching the figure who now stood before him, she was tall, her armor shining with alien light, her long blade glowing with deadly energy. Her people called her Commander Sereth, a warrior feared across many worlds. And now, she pressed her sword to the human's throat. "Any last words, human?" Her voice was sharp, filled with cold hate. She had killed many before, and this one would be no different. At least that was what she believed. The human did not beg, he did not cry. He did not even look afraid. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah," he said, his voice low but clear. "Your grip is weak." The words struck her like a hidden blade. For a second, her hand trembled, the sword shaking against his neck. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had dared mock her strength at the edge of death. But this human did, calmly, fearlessly. She narrowed her eyes, trying to hide the sudden doubt in her chest. Was he lying? Was it just a trick? But when she looked closer, she saw no fear in him, only quiet defiance. It unsettled her. Her people had told her humans were weak, fragile creatures who begged for mercy. Yet this one looked at her as if she was the one trapped, not him. She pressed the sword harder, but her voice came out lower, uncertain. "You dare mock me when you stand at death's edge?" The human's smile did not fade. He leaned closer, so the glowing blade nearly touched his skin. "I'm not mocking," he said. "I'm telling you the truth." For the first time in many battles, Sereth felt hesitation. Her soldiers, hidden in the shadows, waited for her to finish him, but her arm did not move. Her mind was filled with a storm of questions. Why would he say this? Why would a man facing certain death choose to challenge her strength with words? What gave him such calmness when others screamed? The silence between them stretched, heavy and sharp like the blade itself. Around them, the battlefield groaned under the weight of smoke and ruins. Sparks fell from broken machines. The smell of burned soil filled the air. But still, in that moment, only two figures mattered: the alien commander and the human prisoner. Her heart beat harder than she wanted to admit. She remembered the lies told by her leaders, that humans were cowards, weaklings, invaders without honor. But this one was different. He stood with quiet courage, and that courage shook her resolve more than any blade could. The human's eyes locked on hers, steady and unbroken. "You can kill me," he whispered, "but you'll remember these words forever." She did not know why those words struck so deep. Her fingers tightened on the hilt, but her arm refused to obey. Her thoughts tangled with doubt. Was she still the unbreakable commander, or was she now the one being tested? The sword lowered slightly, just a fraction, but enough that her soldiers watching from afar shifted in confusion. Was their commander hesitating? Impossible. Yet the truth was clear. Her resolve was breaking, piece by piece, with every fearless word the human spoke. And in that moment, the battlefield changed, not because of weapons, not because of power, but because one human, bound in chains, dared to stand without fear, and one alien warrior, holding the sword, began to question everything she thought she knew. The confrontation was not just of blade and prisoner, it was of belief and doubt, of strength and weakness, of fear and courage. And though the sword still touched his neck, the true battle had only just begun. Sereth's blade still hovered near the man's throat, glowing bright against his skin. Every instinct inside her screamed to end him, to silence those bold words forever. But something unseen held her back, an invisible chain around her arm. Her soldiers in the shadows grew restless, waiting for the commander's strike. Yet she did not move, the human's calm face unsettled her more than any battle wound. He had no armor, no weapon, only chains and a broken body. Still, he looked into her eyes with quiet defiance. "Your grip is weak," he had said, and the words still echoed in her mind. Why did they matter? Why did they sting deeper than any blade? "You mock me," she repeated, her voice sharper now, but not as steady as before. The man shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "I speak what I see. And what I see is not weakness of your body, but weakness of your will." Her heart jolted as if struck. No enemy had ever dared suggest she doubted herself. She had led armies, crushed rebels, defeated monsters of steel and fire. But this one human, bound and beaten, had pierced her spirit with nothing but words. She pressed the blade harder, forcing herself to regain control. Blood traced a thin red line across his neck, yet still he did not flinch, his lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "You can kill me now," he whispered. "But if your leaders told you I am your enemy, then they lied to you as well as me." The words landed heavier than the sword in her hand. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in sudden confusion. "What do you mean?" she demanded. The man's chains rattled as he straightened his posture, standing taller despite his wounds. "You think humans came here for war, but we came seeking peace. It was your leaders who turned peace into blood. It is your leaders who feed your people lies." Serath's jaw tightened. Her orders had always been clear. Humans are invaders, destroyers, creatures without honor. But here was one who did not beg for mercy, who did not curse, who did not fear. Instead, he accused her own kind, her own commanders. "That is impossible," she hissed, though her voice wavered. "My people would never betray their own." The human's eyes never left hers. Would they not? Think of the battles you fought, the soldiers who died, the cities burned. Who truly gained from this war, Serath? You, your fallen comrades? Or those who sit on high thrones, safe and untouched, sending you to kill in their name? The name struck her. "How do you know me?" she whispered. The man's smile returned, faint but sure. "I know enough, Commander. I know you fight with honor, not hate, and I know deep inside you feel the truth in my words, even if you want to deny it." Her chest tightened. For years, she had carried doubt's small shadows hidden beneath layers of duty and rage. Why had so many battles felt meaningless? Why did victory taste like ash? Now those doubts rose like fire, fanned by the words of a chained man. She took a step back, lowering her sword just slightly. Her soldiers gasped in the shadows. This was not the Serath they knew, the unbreakable warrior, hesitating before a human. The human leaned forward, chains clinking softly. "I do not ask you to believe me now," he said, "but remember this moment. When you see another battle, when you bury more of your own, when your leaders call for more blood, remember my words. And ask yourself who the true enemy is." Her hand shook. Her breathing grew heavy. The warlord within her screamed to strike him down, but another voice, quieter and deeper, told her that to kill him now would be to silence the truth before she even tested it. She turned her head away, her sword lowering further. The battlefield around them seemed to fade. All that remained was the weight of his words pressing into her soul. Her resolve was breaking, not under steel, but under truth. And in that fragile silence, Serath realized something she had never felt before. Fear not of the man, not of death, but of the possibility that everything she believed might be a lie. The human saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes, and he knew he had won something greater than his life. He had planted a seed that would grow inside her heart and shatter her chains of obedience. For though her sword still glowed, her will was no longer sharp, and so on that burning field, the battle between alien and human shifted, not by strength, but by words, not by blood, but by truth. And Serath, the feared commander, stood frozen not as executioner, but as a woman, standing at the edge of a new path. The night sky above the battlefield was covered with smoke, the stars hidden behind clouds of fire and ash. Serath stood frozen, her glowing blade still in her hand. But her spirit no longer steady. The human's words echoed inside her like thunder in a hollow cave. Your grip is weak. It is not your body, but your will. Her arm trembled, and she hated herself for it. She was Commander Sereth, warrior of the Vayari, destroyer of armies, breaker of chains, but now in front of a wounded human prisoner. She felt as if her strength had cracked. It was not his chains that bound him. It was his unshaken courage that bound her. Behind her, she felt the eyes of her soldiers hidden in the dark. They waited for her strike. They waited for blood. One word from her, and they would rush forward to finish the prisoner. But she did not give the order. Instead, she lowered the blade slightly, as if her hand no longer obeyed her command. The human saw it, and for a moment his lips curved into that small, defiant smile. It was not arrogance nor mockery. It was something far more dangerous. It was belief. Belief that his words had reached her heart. Belief that she would not strike. Why? Do you hesitate, Commander? The man asked, his voice calm though his body bore wounds. You have the power to kill me, yet you do not. Perhaps it is because deep inside, you know I am not your enemy. Sereth's chest tightened. She wanted to deny it, to silence him with her blade, but her thoughts betrayed her. Memories rose, faces of comrades who died in battles that never made sense, orders given that led to slaughter without purpose, questions she had buried, now rising like ghosts she could not banish. Her soldiers began to whisper in the shadows. Uneasy at her silence, the commander never hesitated. The commander never doubted. But tonight, their invincible leader looked fragile. Sereth turned her gaze away from the human, staring at the ruined battlefield around her, broken ships, burning ground, bodies of both sides scattered like forgotten sacrifices. She felt a sudden wave of weariness. How many more battles would look the same? How many more deaths would be demanded in the name of honor, in the name of lies? The human's voice broke through her storm of thought. I have seen this before. Sereth, he said softly, I have seen warriors like you strong, proud, bound by duty. But duty without truth is only another chain. Her grip on the sword faltered again. For years she had told herself she fought for her people, for justice, for survival. But what if it was all for the power of leaders who cared nothing for the dead? What if the human spoke the truth? Silence. She hissed suddenly, forcing strength back into her voice, but even she could hear the crack in it, the weakness she had never allowed before. The human did not flinch. He simply lowered his head slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. You can silence me, but you cannot silence the questions in your heart. Those words were heavier than the chains around his wrists. They struck her deeper than any blade could, because they were true. She did have questions, and once questions begin, they do not die, they only grow. She stepped back, lowering her sword even further. Her soldiers stirred in confusion, some raising their weapons, unsure whether to obey her hesitation or act on their own. One of them called out, voice filled with doubt, Commander, why do you wait? End him now. Sereth spun, her sharp glare silencing them instantly. But the damage was done. Her hesitation was clear to all. Her authority had cracked, just as her resolve had. She turned back to the human. His chains glinted in the firelight, but he stood tall despite them. It was as if he was the free one, and she was the prisoner, trapped by her own doubts, for the first time in her life. Sereth felt fear, not of death, not of defeat, but of truth. Truth that her war, her battles, her very purpose might be nothing more than a carefully crafted lie. And once such a fear takes root, it spreads like fire. She lowered her sword completely, now the glowing blade humming softly as if mocking her weakness. Her soldiers stared in disbelief, but the human only nodded slowly, as though he had expected this moment, as though he had been waiting for it. Now you see, he whispered. This fight was never between you and me, Sereth. It has always been between you and the chains they placed on your mind. Her breath caught in her chest. She wanted to scream, to strike, to end him. But she could not, because somewhere inside, in the deepest part of her heart. She knew he was right, and so the hesitation remained. It wrapped around her like a shadow. It clung to her every breath. It was the hesitation of a warrior standing at the edge of truth, and the path she chose next would change everything. Not just for her, but for both their worlds. The battlefield had grown quiet, but Seraphi's heart was anything but calm. Her sword, once steady as her own breath, now felt heavy in her hand. The human's words pressed on her mind like a weight she could not throw away. Your leaders turned peace into blood. Duty without truth is only another chain. She wanted to dismiss it as lies, clever tricks from a desperate prisoner. But the more she tried to silence the thought, the louder it grew. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was already taking root. The human's eyes never left hers. He could see the storm behind her cold stare. Slowly, he spoke again, his voice low but firm. "Seraph, do you even know why you fight us? Do you know the reason they send you to kill?" Her jaw tightened. She knew the answer her commanders would give. Humans are invaders. Humans are destroyers. Humans must be erased for the safety of the Ve'ari. She had repeated those words for years, trained others with them, killed with them. But tonight, under the smoke of another meaningless victory, the words felt hollow. She raised her chin, forcing her voice to sound strong. "My people fight for survival. You came to our worlds with fire." The human's laugh was bitter, dry. "Is that what they told you? That we came with fire?" His words cut sharper than her blade. "We came first with open hands, with gifts, with offers of alliance. Your leaders refused. They feared we would outgrow them, outshine them, so they twisted our arrival into a threat, and they built you into their weapon." Seraph's chest tightened. "No," she whispered. But the word trembled. The human leaned closer, his chains rattling softly as he straightened. "Think, Commander. How many times have you been told humans are weak? Yet here we stand, still fighting after countless battles. Does weakness endure this long? Or is it that your leaders need the war to keep you blind?" Her hands shook. The memories came uninvited. Her first battle, when she watched children flee from burning homes. She had been told those children were dangerous human spies, but they had cried like any other, their fear real, their screams no different from her own people's. At the time, she pushed the memory aside. Now, it returned with burning clarity. The human's voice lowered, almost a whisper. "They fear the day you see us for what we are, not monsters, but mirrors. We are not so different, Seraph, and if you see that, their war crumbles." She turned her head away, refusing to meet his eyes. Her soldiers were still watching, their faith trembling as much as her hand. If they saw doubt in their commander, it would spread like poison. But she could not deny it anymore. The human's words fit too perfectly with the questions she had buried. "Why should I believe you?" she asked finally. The man gave a faint smile, one born not from arrogance but from pain. "You should not yet. Do not believe me because I say it. Believe it because you will see it yourself. Watch your leaders. Watch the way they hide, the way they profit while you bleed. Truth does not need my words. It will find you on its own." Her throat tightened. For the first time in her life, Seraph felt the ground beneath her feet shift, as though the very world she stood on was less solid than she had always believed. A commander should never doubt. A warrior should never question. But she was both, and she was breaking. Her sword lowered again, its glow dimming in the night air. The silence was heavy. She could feel her soldiers' confusion like knives at her back. They did not understand. They could not understand. Their commander, the iron hand of the Ve'ari, was standing still, lost in the words of a human. The man took a slow breath, his eyes soft but unyielding. "Seraph," he said quietly, "one day soon, you will face a choice, your people's truth, or your leader's lies. That day will define not only your fate, but mine as well." Her lips parted, but no words came. The fire around them cracked. The wind carried the smell of war, and in that moment, Sereth knew she had stepped into dangerous territory, not because of the human before her, but because of the questions now alive inside her heart. The hidden truth was no longer hidden. It had begun to rise like a storm on the horizon, and she feared that nothing, no sword, no command, no army could stop it now. The fire on the battlefield burned low, its orange glow flickering against broken walls and shattered steel. Sereth stood in the middle of the ruins, her sword lowered but still glowing faintly. Her soldiers shifted in the shadows, whispering to each other, restless and uncertain. Never before had they seen their commander hesitate. Never before had she let words stop her blade. The human prisoner remained chained, his body weak, his clothes torn, but his eyes steady. He had no weapon, no power, yet somehow he had turned the battle with nothing but his voice. Sereth hated the feeling inside her chest. It was not fear of him, it was fear of herself. Fear that his words were true, fear that she had been blind all along. She clenched her sword tighter, trying to force her strength back. Her soldiers were watching, and if she showed weakness for too long, they might act without her command. Still, her arm refused to rise against him. Her mind refused to silence the doubts. The human's calm voice returned, steady even in chains. "You already know the truth, Sereth," he said softly. "That is why you cannot kill me. If I were truly your enemy, you would have struck without hesitation." She turned on him sharply, her eyes blazing. "You think I cannot end you?" she demanded. The man shook his head slowly. "I think you choose not to." Her chest tightened, her breath uneven. Choice. That was the word she had avoided her whole life. As a commander, she followed orders. As a warrior, she obeyed commands. There was no choice, only duty. But now, for the first time, she stood between two paths: kill the human or spare him. And both paths carried weight she had never felt before. Her soldiers' whispers grew louder. One of them stepped forward, bow drawn, his voice hard. "Commander, enough of this. Let us finish him." Sereth spun, her glare silencing him instantly. But she saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear of the human, but fear of her hesitation. She turned back to the prisoner, her heart pounding. If she killed him, the doubt might fade. Her soldiers would obey, and the war would continue. But if she spared him, she would defy her leaders, defy her orders, defy everything she had sworn to uphold. It was a dangerous path, one that could turn her people against her. The man's voice came again, softer this time. "You must decide, Sereth. Will you be the blade of their lies or the shield of your own truth?" Her hand shook around the hilt. She remembered the faces of her comrades, fallen in endless battles. She remembered children screaming as flames consumed their homes. She remembered victories that felt like losses. And she remembered the words he had spoken, words that refused to die inside her. The choice pressed on her like the weight of the sky. Her soldiers' loyalty, her people's future, her own honor, all balanced on this moment. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "If I let you live, my world will see me as a traitor." The human met her gaze, unwavering. "Maybe, but if you kill me, you will see yourself as one." Her breath caught. The sword in her hand felt heavier than ever before. It was no longer just a weapon. It was the measure of her soul, and she could not ignore it any longer. With a trembling exhale, she lowered the blade completely. The glow dimmed, humming faintly before fading into silence. Gasps erupted from the shadows as her soldiers stepped back in disbelief. Their commander, the unbreakable Sereth, had spared a human. For a long moment, no one spoke. The battlefield was filled only with the crackle of fire and the cold wind of the night. Then Sereth lifted her head, her eyes hard though her voice was heavy. "This man does not die tonight," she declared. Her soldiers stared, frozen between obedience and shock. One tried to speak, but her glare cut him down to silence. The human straightened as much as his chains allowed, his lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. He had not won by strength, but by faith. And now Sereth had chosen not with her sword, but with her heart. But deep inside, she knew this choice was not the end. It was only the beginning. By sparing him, she had lit a fire that could not be hidden. Her soldiers would whisper. Her leaders would rage. Her world would tremble. And she, Commander Sereth, would face the storm. Because she had made a choice. Not the safe one, not the ordered one, but the true one. And nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The battlefield was no longer filled with the noise of weapons, but with silence that felt even heavier. Sereth stood tall, her sword lowered completely, the glow fading like dying fire. Her soldiers stared in shock, unable to understand what they had just witnessed. Their commander, the warrior who never hesitated, had spared a human. Whispers spread quickly. Why? One soldier muttered, "She has lost her edge," another hissed. But none dared step closer, for her presence still carried the weight of command. Even if her blade no longer did, the human prisoner stood chained, his body weak but his spirit strong. He looked at her with quiet triumph, not the triumph of victory, but of survival. "You could have ended me," he said softly, his voice carrying across the ruined ground. "But you did not. That choice will haunt you, Sereth, but it will also free you." Her jaw tightened, her chest heavy. She hated the truth in his words, hated the weakness in her arm. For years, her resolve had been her greatest strength. She had been the sword of her people, the unbroken shield, the commander who never faltered. But now, she had broken. Her resolve, once as sharp as the blade she carried, had cracked under the weight of doubt. She had not killed him, not because she could not, but because she would not. And that terrified her more than anything else. Her second in command, a soldier named Rinner, finally stepped forward. He was loyal, but loyalty came second to fear of betrayal. "Commander," he said firmly, "this is dangerous. If we return with him alive, the High Council will see it as treason." Sereth turned her head slowly, her eyes narrowing. "Then let them," she replied coldly. Her soldiers shifted uneasily at her words. Treason was death, and yet their commander spoke it as if it was nothing more than another battle to face. The human's calm voice cut through the tense air. "They will come for you now, Sereth, not because you spared me, but because sparing means you are no longer their perfect weapon." The truth of it pierced her deeper than her own doubts. She had always known her worth to the High Council. She was their blade, their enforcer, their symbol of power. But a blade that questioned its master was dangerous. And masters never let dangerous blades live for long. Her soldiers were still watching, waiting for direction. Some eyes were filled with confusion, others with suspicion. She could feel the cracks spreading, cracks not just in her resolve, but in the loyalty of those who followed her. "Bind him tighter," she ordered suddenly, her voice sharp. Two soldiers stepped forward, wrapping heavier chains around the human's arms. Yet even as they did, Sereth knew the act was hollow. The chains on his body meant nothing compared to the words he had spoken. It was not he who was bound, it was she, tied by the truth she could no longer ignore. Her mind raged. She told herself she had made a mistake, that mercy was weakness, that her hesitation would destroy everything she had built. But another part of her whispered soft, dangerous, that perhaps weakness was not what she thought it was. Perhaps for the first time, she had acted not as a weapon, but as herself. Human met her gaze, calm and steady. "You are not weak, Sereth," he said quietly, as though reading her thoughts. "You are free." The words burned inside her. Freedom, was that what this was? It felt heavier than chains, sharper than any blade. And yet, deep inside, it also felt real. Her soldiers pulled the man back, forcing him to his knees again. But Sereth could not take her eyes off him. Even bound, even beaten, he seemed stronger than all of them combined, because he had broken her resolve, and in doing so, he had shown her a path she had never dared imagine. The night grew colder, the wind carrying ash across the ruins. Sereth raised her sword one last time, staring at its fading glow. Once, it had been the symbol of her strength. Now, it felt like a reminder of chains she no longer wanted. Her voice rang out across the silence, sharp and final. "This battle is over. We return to the council with the prisoner. But know this, what happened tonight stays between us. Her soldiers bowed their heads, obeying. Though unease lingered in their eyes, they would not forget this night. Neither would she. As they marched back into the shadows of war, Sereth knew her path was broken. Her resolve was gone, and yet, for the first time, she felt the faint spark of something else. Not obedience, not duty, not fear, but freedom, and with freedom came danger. For she had spared a human, and the council would never forgive her for it. The march back from the battlefield was slow, heavy with silence. The soldiers carried their weapons, their armor still stained with the blood of the night, but none of them dared speak. None dared question what they had seen. Their commander, Sereth, had lowered her blade against a human, and the image of it burned in their minds. The prisoner walked among them, bound by heavy chains, his steps unsteady but his spirit unbroken. Even with bruises on his body, his eyes glowed with quiet defiance. Every step he took felt like a reminder. He was alive not because of mercy, but because Sereth had made a choice. Sereth walked at the front, her sword sheathed, her mind filled with storms. She could still hear the whispers of her soldiers behind her, but louder than them were the whispers inside her heart. The human's words echoed again and again. You are not weak, Sereth. You are free. The council would see her as broken. She knew that. They would not forgive hesitation. They would not forgive doubt and sparing a human. That was treason beyond redemption. Her own people might turn on her. Her own soldiers might betray her. And yet, as she walked, she realized she did not regret it. For the first time in her life she had chosen. Not because of duty, not because of orders, but because of herself, and that choice, dangerous as it was, felt more real than any victory she had ever won. The prisoner stumbled, his chains clattering against the ground. Sereth turned sharply, her instincts forcing her forward. She caught his arm before he fell, steadying him. The soldiers behind her stiffened in shock, their commander touching a human, helping him stand. Whispers grew louder, but Sereth ignored them. The man looked up at her, his face pale but his eyes strong. You did not have to help me, he murmured. Sereth's jaw tightened. Perhaps not, she replied, her voice low. But I did. It was a simple act, but in that moment, it felt like rebellion. A small flame of defiance against the chains of her own people. And deep inside, she knew it was only the beginning. When they finally reached the edge of the ruins, Sereth called for a halt. The soldiers gathered, their eyes on her, waiting for orders. She looked at them, each one loyal, each one trained to obey. But she could see the cracks: fear, suspicion, confusion. She had shown weakness in their eyes. Now she had to show something else. Her voice rang out, cold and sharp. This man is under my command. The council will decide his fate. Not you, not tonight. The soldiers bowed their heads reluctantly. They obeyed, but their silence was filled with doubt. As the march continued, the human whispered so only she could hear. You cannot hide this forever. Sereth, the council will test you. Your soldiers will question you. But remember, your path is no longer theirs. It is your own. His words struck her harder than any battle wound. For so long she had believed her path was written. A path of obedience, of endless war, of being the council's blade. Now, for the first time, she saw another road, a new path, dangerous, uncertain, but hers. The night air grew colder, the wind carrying the scent of smoke and ash. Sereth looked back once, at the battlefield fading into the distance, a place of fire, death, and chains. She realized she was leaving more behind than just ruins. She was leaving behind the last of her old self. Ahead lay danger, betrayal, judgment, war. But ahead also lay something she had never known: truth, freedom, and perhaps even alliance with the enemy she had been trained to hate. The human walked beside her, still chained, yet stronger than any prisoner she had ever seen. And for the first time, Sereth wondered if the chains around him would one day be broken, not by her sword, but by her choice, The path was new, uncertain, and filled with shadows, but Seraph no longer feared it, for she had already broken once, and in that breaking, she had found something greater, not weakness, not defeat, but freedom. And so, under the dark sky, Commander Seraph and the chained human walked forward together, not as enemies, not yet as allies, but as two beings bound by fate, two souls who had defied destiny, two voices that might one day change the future of both their worlds. A new path had begun, and neither sword nor chain could stop it now.